All right, welcome in team. Today we're going to be going over the ICE Strike Charge Staff Monk build that I've been running for the past about 30 or so levels. This build is incredibly beginner friendly. It's really easy to understand how the different elemental damages work and how the various support gems all play together. And I think it's a really good build for learning how some of the various systems in Path of Exile 2 work. I've really enjoyed blasting away. It's really fast. It clears lots of screens of enemies, and it's good at downing bosses really quickly. And it just looks fucking badass having this lightning bolt that's flying off your staff. I mean, I can't think of a build in another ARPG that's looked so fucking cool. So let's go over the build. Let's start with the skills and go over how it all works. The best place to start is to say that we're using Combat Frenzy to generate our power charges. Because we're using Charge Staff to get our lightning damage into our build, we are using Combat Frenzy. Combat Frenzy makes it to where we gain a Frenzy charge whenever we freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy. And we're using that in combination with the passive skill, a keystone of Resonance, which makes it to where whenever we gain a Frenzy charge, instead we will gain a power charge. So using those two in tandem means that we gain a power charge whenever we freeze an enemy. In it, I've also slotted in Profusion. This gives us just a 50% chance every time we gain a charge to gain an additional charge. Just make sure that we have power charges whenever we need them. So our main skill is Ice Strike. Ice Strike just gives us fast, icy strikes that have a gap close ability on them. So whenever you go to attack an enemy, your character will actually fly across the screen in order to hit them. It makes you incredibly fast whenever you're going through. And the third attack in the chain will do an additional amount of cold damage. It will also have increased range, and it does an absolute crap ton of attack damage. So there's 524% of our base damage. It's an insane amount of damage. This makes it to where we're basically killing enemies on that third strike. In order to make sure we get to our third strike a lot faster, we are using Martial Tempo as a support gem to give us 25% more attack speed. Also using Ice Bite here. This gives us 35% of damage as cold damage for 3 seconds when we freeze an enemy with supported skills. So we're always freezing enemies with our Ice Strike, and this is giving us 100% uptime on our Ice Bite, which is giving us 35% of damage as cold damage for 3 seconds every time we kill any enemy, and it applies to all of our attacks. So we put that in there to make sure we get it on every single time that we freeze an enemy with Ice Strike. Then we're using Concentrated Effect, which deals 40% more area damage to make sure that third strike or even the other strikes are dealing a little bit more damage. And then there's less area of effect on that, but that's okay because we just want to kill maybe one of the enemies, and that'll trigger the explosions that we're doing with our other abilities. Last up, we've got Primal Armament. This is dealing 25% more weapon elemental damage. As you can see, I only have 4 support gems in on this skill. I only have 4 support gem slots on this one skill anyway. I haven't unlocked any of the other ones yet, and I actually got this additional socket just by doing Val Orbs on the Ice Strike. I don't think that you need the 5th slot yet. You're gonna probably not need that until you're really late into the game, so don't try to force that one into your build quite yet. If you only have 3 gems, just take Primal Armament out of this instead, and you'll still be doing tons of damage. Shattering Palm is another skill that we're using. Shattering Palm just gives us a dash ability, which lets us clear one mob and then very quickly close in on the next mob. It helps with applying cold damage to the one enemy and all surrounding enemies. And whenever you do enough damage to the first enemy, it will cause an explosion of these icy shards that are attached to the enemy and to all of the enemies around. So it gives us a nice starter with a bunch of cold damage right up front. In Shattering Palm, I'm using Cold Infusion. This is giving us an additional 25% of damage as extra cold damage at the sacrifice of fire and lightning, but that's okay. We're not using that with the Shattering Palm anyway. And then we're also using glaciation to make sure that when those explosions are happening from the shards, we're getting more freeze buildup because we want enemies to be frozen. And then I've also thrown in Cold Mastery to give one more level of supported skill here. You could probably swap this one out for another support gem, but adding 1 point to the skill level here is just makes sense. I had an open slot and I just wanted to use it. This is probably a good time to point out something I've seen in some other build guides on this too. In ICE Strike, I've seen people talking about using Cold Infusion in ICE Strike instead of Ice Bite, and maybe using Ice Bite if once you get that final socket. I don't agree with that. I think that if you're going to get a bonus that is 100% of the time up, you want it to be the 35% bonus. So this is giving you that 35% every time you freeze an enemy with the strike, and you're going to be freezing enemies with pretty much every single one of your ice strikes. So I've moved Cold Infusion down to a different support gem. That just makes more sense for me in the build. Maybe it makes more sense once you get that final socket, you can throw in Cold Infusion as well, but I want to always have this additional 35% of as cold damage throughout all of my attacks all the time. So that's why I'm using it here. Next up, we're using Charge Staff, of course. This is giving us a buff of 1 to 15 quarterstaff attack lightning damage per power charge that we've consumed, up to our maximum power charges, which in our build, we're only going to be using 3 power charges. So we're getting between 3 and 45 added quarterstaff attack lightning damage. This one, I've already gone ahead and qualityed this one to 20% quality on the charge staff, because when you add quality to your charge staff, you get increased skill effect duration. I'm using this here, this 20%, to make sure I always have uptime on charge staff. I never have downtime when I'm on my charge staff. As you kill a pack of enemies, you will gain a power charge. You just pop your charge staff there to refresh the duration. Using the support gems for charge staff, we have Lightning Infusion. This is giving us 25% of damage as extra lightning damage. Also using Coursing Current. This is giving us a chance to spread the shock to surrounding enemies whenever we shock using the charge staff, and using Conduction, which gives us 100% more chance to shock. You'll notice that I'm not using the support gem that gives us more duration on the skill effect, because I just don't need it. I have 100% uptime thanks to how often I'm getting the power charges and consuming them. So this is freeing me up to get more damage into the build. And the way I'm getting more damage into the build is through Coursing Current. By making sure that I get that shock applied to more enemies, I'm getting a better chance at getting my Herald of Thunder to proc and making sure that they take more damage from all of my charged staff attacks that come down the line. Tempest Bell is in this build. Tempest Bell is basically our oh shit button. This is how we save ourselves whenever we're in a sticky situation. Anytime we're up against the boss, we're going to just slap this thing down and we're just going to go to town on it and kill the boss off quickly. If there's a rare mob or if we get surrounded, this is our get out of jail free card. So Tempest Bell is pretty much just used for that reason. In it, we're using Rage so that we gain 3 Rage on every melee hit. And we're using Ruthless so that way we get the additional stun buildup. This is really just helpful for the boss encounters. So you get a chance to stun them very quickly, and you get a chance to freeze them. And you just have a constant rotation of freeze and stun and freeze and stun. It helps you kill off any enemies that survive your initial wave of attacks. I'm also throwing in Soul Thief here. I've been playing around with this third socket to try to figure out what else is useful, but what I've been finding is that Soul Thief is really helpful for this. Whenever we're hitting our oh shit button, we want to be able to slap down and make sure we're not running out of mana as we're using our Ice Strike. This will become very important and apparent here in a moment when we start talking about the gear and the passives. You'll see why this is very necessary. Herald of Ice is in this build, so we're using Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder. This is how we're getting basically the entirety of our damage. Herald of Ice is going to make sure every enemy around explodes whenever you kill one that's been frozen. And we're using that in combination with, in our inventory, we've got Pulsar Kelm, so that enemies chilled with your hits can be shattered as though frozen. This is the really important line that we want to follow here. So, an important thing about Herald of Ice is that whenever you kill a frozen enemy, it will explode. It does 100% of explosion physical damage converted to cold damage, but an important thing is that it cannot freeze itself, but it can chill. So because it can chill, this Pulsar Kelm is making it to where any enemy that's killed by the Herald of Ice also shatters as if they were frozen, making them then chain down the effect to every other enemy on the screen, all of them acting as if they were frozen. So this is a massive amount of damage that we're getting. This Pulsar Kelm, it took me like 4 days in order to be able to buy this on the shop for around 20 exalts. I think I bought it for 20 exalts. So if you're having trouble getting this, you don't need it until you're much later in, but you don't really need this in your build. There's a lot of other ways you can get damage into your build, but I saw this one and I just had to go out there and try it for myself. But it costs around 20 exalts as of the time of recording. Maybe you have to go out there and spend 25 or 30, but I wouldn't go any much higher than that unless the percent increased cold damage is much greater. It's up to 30% and it's got mana quality already on it. Otherwise, just skip it. In our Herald of Ice, I am using Innervate, which might sound weird, but Innervate will give us 35% of damage as lightning damage when we kill a shocked enemy with a Herald of Ice. So whenever Charge Staff shocks an enemy, we're making sure Innervate pops off whenever Herald of Ice kills those enemies. So we're always getting this 35% of damage as lightning damage because Herald of Ice is killing off all of the enemies, and especially if they're shocked and using Coursing Current, make sure that enemies have a better chance of getting shocked. We're also using Magnified Effect. This is just making sure that our Herald of Ice explosions are even bigger, and we're using Ambush. So whenever this hits an enemy with the Herald of Ice explosion, if they're on full life, then we've now got double the amount of critical hit chance against them. And if we can crit them, then we can kill them and they'll explode and chain down the line to more enemies. We're also using Herald of Thunder here. Herald of Thunder is going to make sure that it is casting lots of lightning bolts down on enemies whenever we kill a shocked enemy. So again, that's why that Coursing Current is in the mix. We want to make sure Coursing Current is shocking lots of enemies if it were to apply a shock. When it applies that shock, the Herald of Thunder can trigger off of any of the kills. In Herald of Thunder, I'm using long shot. Enemies are usually farther away than 7 meters, so we're getting up to 35% more attack damage. And then we're using Heft, which is going to increase the maximum physical damage in our roll. And we're using Cold Penetration to penetrate 30% of their cold resist. This might sound strange, but Herald of Thunder actually does some cold damage. It does 459 cold damage without the additional amount that we get from Ice Bite. So it's going to have 30% penetration of cold resistance, so that if it does chill an enemy, they'll die and they'll explode using Pulsar Kelm. So it is adding to that effect of everything exploding because they've been chilled or frozen. And the last two things we have in our skill gem sockets are Grim Feast. Grim Feast makes it to where you can get your bunch of energy shield whenever enemies or minions die in your presence. You don't have minions, but whenever enemies die in your presence, there's a chance that they'll drop a Grim Remnant. You can just run over and pick it up, and it gives you a bunch of energy shield, and it gives you a chance to double your amount of energy shield just by killing enemies and picking up the remnants. In that one, I've slotted in Clarity just to make sure we get a little bit more mana regen, and we've got Wind Dancer in as well. Wind Dancer is going to give us a ton more evasion rating, and when we are hit, we are able to knock back enemies, but we're really just using this for the amount of evasion rating. We're getting basically 20% more evasion rating per stage, and there are 3 stages, so we're getting 19% times 19% times 19%, which is more than 60%. but we're getting a lot of evasion rating just from this Wind Dancer. In it, I've put in Energy Barrier, just making sure that if we do get stunned while it's up, we get an energy shield recharge that happens immediately, and it can't be interrupted, so we can get our energy shield back. We also have Cannibalism. This is just helping with life recovery should we lose our energy shield. This is supposed to trigger to give us 4% of life recovery whenever we kill an enemy. So one thing before we move on to the passive tree is in my quarterstaff, I've got +6 level to all melee skills. This one is starting to feel like a bait the further I get into it. It is making our items and our skills be a lot stronger, but it is costing us a ton of mana. So our Ice Strike is currently level 23. And if we go and we look at the skill gem itself, it is using up 66 mana per attack. And if we go to charge staff, we are adding an additional 49 mana. So we're using 100 mana per attack. And when we go to our attack speed on our Ice Strike, we have 3.69 attacks per second. So let's just multiply that by 100 mana. You know, we're using 369 mana every second. That's a ton of mana. So we are in a position where we have to use a lot of our passive points to try to mitigate the high mana cost. So as we go through this, I'll talk about how I'm mitigating those mana costs. I only have 2 of the ascendancies completed. I haven't been able to complete the Trial of the Sekima or the Inscribed Ultimatums for my 3rd and 4th ascendancy points. I just keep getting unlucky and rolling into I lose all of my evasion rating, or I lose all of my energy shield, random afflictions on the Sekima, and I'm just getting really tired of it, so I'm not even dealing with those yet. So first points gone into Chill Effect and into I Am the Blizzard, giving us 10% of damage as extra cold damage. And whenever we freeze an enemy, we create chilled ground. This just is enabling our cold damage even further. Then we're using this top section here for increased evasion rating and increased maximum energy shield. And we're using Lead Me Through Grace. Lead Me Through Grace gives us 1 spirit for every 6 energy shield on our equipped body armor. And we get 1 spirit for every 15 evasion rating on our equipped body armor, but we can't gain spirit from equipment. And that's okay. We're just gonna go for the body armors that have the most evasion rating, and you'll see how that all kind of plays out in our evasion becoming an insanely high number. So for the passive skills, let's just go over the notables that are worth mentioning. I'll leave this on the screen so you can see sort of the pathing, but we're using Flow Like Water to get those attack and cast speed, Flow State for even more skill speed so we can attack faster and use our skills faster. This is giving us some more mana regenerate. And then using Essence of the Storm gives us 5% of damage as extra lightning damage. That extra word, we really want that. And 30% increased chance to shock, which helps us with the Herald of Thunder. We're using Mindful Awareness for the extra evasion rating and energy shield, and using Step Like Mist because there's really just not a lot of movement speed in the skill tree. So trying to path to as much of that movement speed as we can. This is also giving us some more mana regen. As we path up and we go down, I'm also grabbing Essence of the Mountain. This is giving us that 5% of damage as extra cold damage and more freeze buildup. These ones are really good for making sure we get our freeze going. I'm going to go up the chain now and talk about the ones up here. We are grabbing Moment of Truth, which is just giving us that 25% increased critical damage if you've dealt a non-crit recently, as well as some more crit damage and crit hit chance. I'm thinking about taking these points out and shifting over into this area here for the jugular, and then eventually to Deadly Force. I think these will make a lot more of an impact in the crit realm, but for now, because I've only got these 4 points, this is where I'm sitting until I get enough points to really kind of shift those around. Coming up, we are grabbing Alternating Current. Alternating Current and all of the nodes that lead to it give us more mana regenerate and increased magnitude of shock that we inflict. And the main one being that we get 25% increased if we've shocked an enemy recently. We're shocking enemies all the time, so we're constantly getting that increased mana regen rate to help with our high mana cost. We're also getting shattering. This gives us more freeze buildup and more magnitude of chill that we inflict. Above that, we're grabbing Echoing Frost and some of these elemental damage nodes, as well as Echoing Thunder, which gives us 30% increased elemental damage if we shocked an enemy recently, and 30% increased elemental damage if we chilled an enemy recently, making sure that we're playing off of both of our elemental damages. Also picking up Conservative Casting, again, to help with the mana cost. This is giving us a ton of regen rate and 8% reduced mana cost of skills. So this is making it to where it doesn't cost quite as much mana when we use our Ice Strike and our Charge Staff, but yeah, it is giving us some more mana regen rate as well to help out. Pathing up along here, we are grabbing, like I said earlier, Resonance to get those extra power charges instead of frenzy charges. And I pathed up to get this jewel. We're going to come back to the jewels in a minute, but I did path to get a jewel there so I can have a little bit more flexibility with the build. Moving up along this route, we're grabbing Spectral Ward. This one is giving us 1 energy shield per 12 evasion rating on our equipped body armor. Use that in tandem with Lead Me Through Grace, means that we want to find body armors that have a ton of evasion. So if we look at my current body armor, this one has 1700 evasion. It has 20% to the quality, and it's got some pretty high rolls on flat and increased evasion rating. You could go out and find an even better evasion rating armor set if you go to the trade site. This is the one I picked up, I think around level 70, it looks like. The more evasion rating you've got, so 1700 evasion rating with Lead Me Through Grace, that's giving us enough spirit to where we don't need any more spirit in order to use all of our heralds and our buffs. And then we pair that with the Spectral Ward. It's giving us 1 maximum energy shield per the 12 evasion rating. So you can see here we're losing about 340 energy shield. So really good to just use that as a multiplier for our energy shield. Also path to this final jewel slot here. Again, come back to the jewel slots and what I'm doing with those and why those are important. Going back to the start of our tree, we are picking up Siphon. This is one that I'm playing with right now, recovering 2% of mana on kill and 25% increased mana leech. I am looking for jewels to give me some mana leech or some gloves to give me more mana leech into the build. I want to get mana leech to help offset some of those mana costs. Not sure if that's the best play yet, but just going to try it out for a little bit and see what works. Going down, we're picking up Blinding Strike for all the increased attack damage, and it helps that we can blind enemies on hit just to help us out a little bit. With our high evasion rating and the blind, it helps with reducing their accuracy, and then we're not getting hit very often. Picking up Subterfuge Mask. This gives us 2 evasion rating per max energy shield on an equipped helmet. So find a helmet that gives you a ton of energy shield, and this one adds to your evasion rating. As we path along further, I'm also pathing down into this area, this cluster, to grab more dexterity. This is allowing me to use more of the travel nodes for intelligence and strength, which we do need into the build. Pathing along, we're grabbing enhanced reflexes for that increased dexterity and increased evasion rating. And we're using Bestial Skin, which is doubling the evasion rating that we get from our equipped body armor. So instead of 1700, we're actually getting 3400 evasion rating. It's an insane amount. It's a great one to grab, and then this is all adding on top of it. Going down into this area, I am grabbing increased melee damage and increased strike range, as well as the increased melee attack speed here. And we're picking up this other jewel socket down here. As we follow along this travel path here, we will head into this section, which gives us Coming Calamity, which gives us 50% increased elemental damages whenever we use any of the heralds. So because we are using Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder, we're getting 50% increased cold damage and 50% increased lightning damage. There's a lot of damage to be picked up there. And then we're coming up into this section here, which is affecting quarterstaves. So I have started off by grabbing the increased attack speed with the quarterstaff. as well as the increased critical damage bonus and the 25 to dexterity here. The next steps would be to take the top of this section so that way we get more of the freeze and stun buildup, but I haven't seen that these are necessary at the moment because Pulsar Keln is shattering enemies as if they were frozen anyway. So all you really need is chill. So I think I can save on these 3 points and instead either head down into this section to get some more crit damage, crit chance, or use them somewhere else to try to pick up some more crit into the build. With the jewels, I am using them to help sort of offset some of the mana costs. So here we've got a sapphire inserted that's giving us more energy shield recharge rate, a 9% increased mana regen rate. Not great. I'm actually going to look to upgrade this one here pretty soon. Over here, we've got the Glyph Prism Ruby that's inserted. This one's giving us 9% increased global physical damage, some 10% increased area of effect, and 2 stats that I don't care about. So this one isn't great, but it's got 2 effects that I really do want. I'm thinking maybe I'll swap this one out for something that gives rage on hit. That would be great to push that damage up without needing the Tempest Bell to be down to give us the rage. Down here, we've also got an Emerald in. This is giving us the 8% increased attack damage and 13% increased damage with quarterstaves. There is 2 abilities on this one that I just don't care about. It's the increased attack speed with crossbows and duration of the ailments. Again, this is one that I'm going to be trying to swap out, looking for some more attack speed or mana leech so that we can get some more mana leech into the build. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do yet, but we're using the jewels to kind of give us that flexibility as we're going through. And then lastly, I've got one more down here. This sapphire is the one that I really like having in. It's giving 17% increased maximum energy shield, 10% increased critical hit chance, and 12% increased energy shield recharge rate. So that's helping solve some of our survivability issues, as well as some more of our crit hit chance is being added in that. If I were to get 3 more points, I would then socket up into this jewel socket, which would give me even more options and more ability to kind of play around. At one point, I was running all of the power charges with this build. So I was running the power within as well as lust for power and running overflowing power. But the problem with that is that you're really using a lot of points, even if all you're doing is overflowing with power. 4 points to get some buffs added to your charge staff. It really wasn't coming through in the damage. Once you lean into Pulsar Keln and lean into Herald of Ice, you don't need all of that power charge, that buff on your charge staff. So we ignored some of that. I have seen some other people pathing up and getting some of this freeze buildup and some of this mana regen that is up in this area, some of these crits, but I haven't seen a need for them yet. We'll see what that looks like. At one point, I was also running 10-fold attacks and killer instincts. These were great to get some more attack damage, but I ended up finding attack damage in other ways through the jewels and feeling like I could save on the points that were needed for these. So last but not least, go over a little bit of the gear. I don't want to cover it all in too much detail, but the main things that are coming through, as we've talked about, the vest having a ton of evasion rating, so we're getting a ton of spirit and we're getting a ton of energy shield off of it. We want to make sure we've got that. That's the main piece that keeps us alive. Our quarterstaff here, I've got this one that I bought for 1 or 2 exalts. It is got some lower increased percentage rolls, so you can definitely push this and get a lot higher, but you're starting to push into a very much more expensive build. Again, it's got added level of melee skills, and that is eating into our mana costs and costing us passive skill points. So I might drop that and go for something that's got maybe more attack speed. I think I'd rather have attack speed than the melee skills at this point. So let's run a quick tier 8 map just so you can see what it looks like and I can talk through it. I'm not going to run anything too spicy so that I can still keep talking while I'm doing it. And we can just very quickly run through and Shattering Palm to start our combo, and then hit them with a couple ice strikes and they will just explode down the entire screen. Yeah, we'll just start off every encounter by shattering palm to dash in and then hit him with the ice strike. And as you can see, our charge staff is up 100% of the time, and um, our ice buff is up 100% of the time from ice bite as well. So we don't need that ice bite to be on anything else, and it's giving us that 35% damage rather than needing cold infusion to give us only 25%. So I think it's just a better option until you get an additional support gem socket. So that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button down below. It really does help a small channel like mine. Maybe you can click subscribe too while you're at it. If there's anything I can do to improve on my build or improve on how I present build guides in the future, please just let me know in the comments below. I look forward to doing more of these and having an opportunity to do this. If you did like this video and you're interested in some more of my videos, there'll be some links all around the screen you can check out right now. And with that, I'm Ice Cold Snake. I'll see you next time.